MapDad here, thankful for another father-son adventure, this time to the Pacific Northwest to visit two states for the first time, Oregon and Washington, states 43 and 44 in the quest for 50. Flew into Seattle and headed south on I-5, stopping in the state capital of Olympia to pick up some snacks and check out the impressive Capitol building. Portland, Oregon, the first overnight stop. We stayed at the Hyatt-centric downtown. And while $325 a night, including tax and breakfast, wasn't bad, charging $55 a night to park, shame. A decent room, had a nice little sitting area, and a record player for some reason. That first night, it was game on at Providence Park to watch the Portland Timbers of Major League Soccer take on the San Jose Earthquakes. Despite being down 2-0, the Timbers miraculously rally for a 4-2 win, aided by a red card on San Jose. And we sat in a section of the stadium where food was included, so 4 hot dogs later, ugh. The next morning, just over half an hour east of Portland, is the state's most popular tourist stop. Multnomah Falls, 620 feet tall, it is truly mesmerizing. And we then took a steep 45-minute climb up to the top. I was actually disappointed in the view from here. They have that viewing spot set up so you don't see it from the ground, which is good, but man, I could have skipped that hike. Heading east then from the falls, out another 40-minute beautiful drive along the Columbia River Gorge to Hood River, and then south another hour or so to see Mount Hood. The day was glorious, the mountain truly majestic as we approached. And we drove up to the Timberline Lodge. The Shining movie, anyone?
Here's Johnny!
No hiking here. Dozens of people, though, were still snowboarding. Coming down the mountain, a good sandwich stop in the town of Government Camp at Charlie's Mountain View, where MapDad got his first view of a Cybertruck, for what that's worth. Taking US 26 back towards Portland, a stop at Joe's Donuts in the town of Sandy, and in the town called, of all things, Boring, I dropped $16 for 2 tickets at the North American Bigfoot Center. And they are passionate about finding that Sasquatch. To wrap up this jam-packed day, yes, a concert was involved. By dumb luck, the Fruit Bats were playing at the Aladdin Theater, and with ticket prices for many acts out of sight, $30 felt like a deal. Our last day in Oregon started with breakfast at Cheryl's on 12th. Very good. Catching up with an old friend from high school who, having lived in Portland for decades, said, yeah, the city is not what it used to be. Now, without making a political statement, I was saddened to see the number of tents downtown and the number of people likely needing mental help walking the streets. And then there was the guy openly urinating on the street as I ate breakfast. It's sad, because Portland seems like such a cool place. You could spend an eternity inside Powell's books, where I did find Map Wife's health memoir on display. So heading west out of Portland on day 3 of our trip, it was off to the Oregon coast. First to Cannon Beach and to see the famous Haystack Rock, which stands like a sentinel 236 feet high just offshore. Truly amazing and a neat little beach town. Just to the north is Seaside, which has more of your traditional family beach attractions, though not quite beach weather in the traditional sense. We did get some good sandwiches from the Tsunami Sandwich Company. Not far from the Pacific, we stopped at Lewis and Clark National Park and took a walk along the aptly named Lewis and Clark River. From there, we went north on the 101 to Astoria. Reminded me of a smaller San Francisco with the incredibly steep hills. We didn't get a chance to get out and walk around, but it looked very cool as the biggest city for miles around. Crossing into Washington State, we took the white knuckle-inducing Astoria-Megler Bridge. Quite a view. And we would drive along the Columbia River shoreline back inland to the town of Castle Rock to stay at the Mount St. Helens Motel for 2 nights. $130 a night, donuts in the morning, the nicest people at the front desk. Dinner was next door at Parker's. It was humming on a Friday night. Don't go starving. Service was painfully slow, but the food was good. So day 4 was an hour-long drive from Castle Rock to see Mount St. Helens. It would actually be the 44th anniversary of the eruption the day we were there, so there was no charge for admission. And we stopped at all 3 visitor centers along the 45-mile route.
So now you can see how the
Not quite Disney animatronics here. Now, we couldn't get as close to the mountain as we hoped as a landslide last year knocked out the road to the last observatory. And while we had beautiful blue skies at Mount Hood, Mother Nature would hide this mountain from us. But I did manage to get a shot of it from the air as we flew into Seattle. My son and I did walk the 2.5-mile Hummocks Trail, which was very peaceful, seeing only one other person on our hike before the parking lot filled up a bit by midday. For dinner, the self-proclaimed most popular pizza in Southwest Washington, Papa Pete's. Not bad. A crispy, almost crackery crust made it a lot lighter than it looked. On day 5, off to the biggest of the 3 mountains we would see, heading to Mount Rainier, 14,000 plus feet. Once we got into the national park, the drive up was breathtaking. It was snowing at points. There were some viewpoints not to be missed, like Narada Falls, a true winter wonderland in mid-May. We were spending 2 nights at the Paradise Inn inside the park and at an elevation of 5,400 feet. It was the opening weekend for the inn, in fact. Now, I'm no expert outdoorsman. I didn't take weather into consideration, as I had called the national park before we left and spoke with a park ranger explaining as an out-of-stater, what should I expect hiking? Well, he said, right now the trails are under 9 feet of snow. Fortunately, the visitor center rents snowshoes and trekking poles, and off we went. We hit a few trails, and unfortunately, on our main hike, the mountain was hiding. But we did manage to see the top of the mountain when the sun came out late in the day. Another park ranger had tempered our to-hike list because of the conditions. Exhausting and exhilarating. Now, MapDad, not ashamed to say he used his AARP card for the first time to get 10% off the room, which was sparse but pleasant. A lack of hot water in the shower the first day, not as pleasant. Part of the rustic experience? Nah. No TV or Wi-Fi, but you could still get cell service. All in, $388 a night for our family room. That was a room with a queen bed and a room with 2 doubles. Now, we did eat 1 dinner in the dining room. A beautiful space. The food, though, really just fare. We left the next day as we got a heavy dose of liquid sunshine on our way to Seattle to wrap up our trip. A stop at the Museum of Flight south of downtown, well worth the $23 admission. That's a slight AAA discount. Normally it's $26. Highlights included seeing the first ever 747 jumbo jet and a retired Air Force One. This particular plane had carried everyone from Eisenhower to Nixon. Our hotel for the last 2 nights would be the Hyatt Regency downtown off Howell Street and 8th Avenue. A complete 360 from the homey feeling of the Mount St. Helens Motel and the nearly 100-year-old Paradise Inn on Mount Rainier. Slick and modern with prices to match. All in, including fees, taxes, etc., brought the room up to about $500 a night. You could say the views were $1 million, I suppose. Meeting up with a college friend for dinner that night at Seatown Rub Shack and Fish Fry, just north of Pike's Place, a delicious salmon burger. The next day, we took the monorail from just down the block of our hotel over to the Seattle Center. Monorail built in 1962 as part of Seattle's World's Fair, with the Space Needle as its icon. Before taking the elevator up to the top, a stop at the neighboring Chihuly Garden and Glass for a dazzling display of color. Some glass blowers would demonstrate how some of these creations were made. Tickets for Chihuly and the Space Needle, $62.50 for the combo. Not a fan of heights? Well, you might want to skip parts of the Space Needle. You take an elevator along the outside of the structure to the top, you've got a 360-degree view of the city, and 1 floor down, it's a glass floor, and that is a bit trippy. Now, taking the monorail back, $3.50 a ride each way, 3-minute trip there. We then walked to a Seattle institution.
TT in the backtrack! TT in the backtrack!
Pike's Place Market, with dozens of vendors on several levels selling everything from fresh seafood to flowers. Now, just below the main sign greeting visitors is the very colorful and kind of gross gum wall. Yes, walls that are just coated with gum. I overheard a handful of teens saying it was the perfect site to throw something up on their Insta accounts. Lunch would be just across the street from the market at Beecher's Handmade Cheese. I had a mac and cheese with some smoked salmon, fantastic, and washed it down with the flagship sandwich of 2 cheeses with tomato. Really good stuff there. Now, I'm not a coffee drinker, but I had to at least get a shot of the original Starbucks, also across from the market, that often had very long lines. A few minutes down the waterfront from Pike's Place is a new area which seems to be designed to grab the tourists, with harbor rides and a giant Ferris wheel, which got MapDad to take a ride at $18 for 3 whirls around. Speaking of 3, tread cautiously on a good stretch of 3rd Avenue in downtown Seattle, kind of sketch both day and night. On the final day of our adventure, back on the monorail to the Seattle Center and the Museum of Pop Culture with its Frank Gehry designed building. It was initially established in 2000 as the Experience Music Project. There were displays of Jimi Hendrix and Nirvana, lots of sci-fi costumes on display. $26 admission, I'd give it a thumbs up. Then it was back down to the waterfront and the Seattle Aquarium, which, while nice enough, was not $40 nice enough for admission. A better deal at half the price was our last tourist destination, the Underground Tour. Our guide gave us a brief history of the city of Seattle and how the initial mayor was a swindler and cheat, and that after the city burned to the ground in the late 1880s, it was taxes on the ladies of the evening that helped the city raise the money to rebuild. Overall, a fantastic week making memories in a new location. I'm MapDad, hoping to point your travel in the right direction.